Every mother has a dream. A dream to protect their little angel by all means. A dream to give their child the best life they ever could. For Naomi, that dream became a reality all too soon and then was still snatched off her fingers. How does a mother feel when she took an oath to protect her community but can't even keep their little girl safe? What does she do to end the guilt and pain? Will she ever forgive herself? Or will she do the unthinkable? Naomi Carter had always imagined bringing her daughter into a world of love, warmth, and security. She had been only 24 when she gave birth to Mia, and the moment she held her baby girl in her arms, she knew nothing would ever come before her child. The delivery had been long and painful, but as she looked down at her newborn's tiny fingers wrapped around hers, all the suffering faded into a quiet kind of joy. But fate was cruel. That same night, while Naomi lay in her hospital bed, exhausted but content, her fiancé, Mia's father, was out on the water, celebrating with his friends. He was in Georgia for work and she had been eager to share the news with him. Her delivery date had come a little early and all their plans to hold hands as they brought their angel to the world was cancelled. It was just her, the nurses and her beloved fiancé on FaceTime through the hours of labor. Finally, after laborious hours, Naomi brought Mia into the world. But this day of joy was also the day she'd cry the hardest. Naomi couldn't wait to reunite with her fiancé and Luke couldn't wait to see his child. He had booked a ticket, he was flying at sunrise. But little did he know that he'd never see his little girl's face. Little did he know that Mia would grow up without a father. Hours into the night, a boating accident happened. It was just Luke and a few others drinking and celebrating his new fatherhood. But that was his last time with loved ones. That was the last time Luke was ever seen alive. A call in the middle of the night. The words that shattered everything. He was gone. He never got to see his daughter's first smile, never got to hear her first cry. Naomi was left alone, cradling a child she had to raise without him. Days after and his body washed up on the shore, Naomi never found the closure she wanted. But she knew she had to be there for her child. For the next 8 years, Naomi dedicated herself to being the best mother she could be. She worked tirelessly to provide, giving Mia everything she had. As a law enforcement officer, she didn't have the liberty to always be with her child. Patrol duties, late-night paperwork and other emergency calls always take her off the bed late into the night. For years, Naomi always hired the right nanny, making sure her baby had the best. It was a battle. On her financial life, on her career and on her mental health. There were nights she cried herself to sleep, lonely, exhausted, wondering if she had made a mistake believing she could do this alone. But Mia was her light, her reason for pushing forward. Then, like her prayers had been answered, she met Terrence Walker. Terrence was the perfect man. Kind, patient, loving and very successful. He wasn't just charming, he had a way of making her feel safe. For once, she didn't have to be the cop, she could just be Naomi Carter. Something she hadn't been in years. Terrence was everything she wanted. He was interesting, interested in commitment and most importantly, he adored Mia. He didn't just tolerate her presence, he embraced it, treating her as if she were his own. From the moment he entered their lives, he was the father figure Mia never had. When Naomi married him, it felt like a dream. She had found love again, a partner to share her burdens. They built a home together, one that was stable and filled with laughter. And Mia? She adored Terrence. Many never realized that Terence and Mia weren't biologically related, as he took care of the girl like she was his. He dropped her off at school, took her for ice cream breaks and always bought her gifts. Naomi didn't fail to be reminded how lucky she was. She had what most women envied. A man that loved her child just as much as he loved her. But little did Naomi know that his love and devotion to Mia was not platonic. Terence saw a fresh game. An opportunity to take what he wanted, and he groomed her until she was ripe for the taking. As the years passed, Mia and Terence's dollar bond only grew stronger. He helped her with homework, took her to school events, cheered for her at every milestone. Naomi would often smile watching them together, convinced that she had done the right thing. She had given her daughter a father. She never imagined she had given her little angel to a predator. A man who would do anything to get what he wanted. A patient hunter who saw Mia as nothing but prey. Terence had the wealth. He had 2 houses in the city, and 3 years into their marriage, they moved in with him. It was a big move, but Naomi was convinced it was the right thing. A man that wanted to provide for her. To take the load off her shoulders. Naomi found herself needing to work less and less. She was comfortable in her new home and she had everything she'd ever dreamed of. But this was just a mirage, and she'd find out soon enough that the devil had knocked on her door in the form of Terence Walker. As the years passed, Mia grew into a beautiful young woman. She was no longer the little girl Naomi once held in her arms, no longer the child who clung to her mother's side. She was blossoming. And so was her body. With her curves filling out, her smile more captivating, her laughter drawing attention wherever she went. And then the attention came. Boys from the neighborhood began to notice her. They would find excuses to come by, pretending to need help with homework, offering to walk her home from school, lingering near the house just to catch a glimpse of her. Naomi was never overprotective, but just like every other mother, she was wary. She knew what teenage boys were like: sweet-talking, persistent, reckless with hearts. She wanted to keep Mia safe, to shield her from heartbreak, from mistakes she wasn't ready to make. Whenever a boy showed up at their door, Naomi would be the first to turn him away. "Mia doesn't have time today," she would say with a firm voice. And the uniform did help, as Naomi was respected and feared a little. Mia would pout, argue that she wasn't a child, but Naomi stood her ground. "It's for your own good," she would tell her. Mia never saw it that way. She thought her mother was being overprotective, unfair. She hated the way Naomi would send the boys away before she even had the chance to talk to them. It wasn't like she was sneaking out or doing anything bad, she just wanted to have friends, to feel normal. But Naomi didn't budge. And neither did Terence. Mia didn't get any support to frolic with boys, both from her mother or her stepfather. In fact, if there was one thing that Naomi and Terence agreed on, it was that Mia was too young to have a boyfriend. It didn't matter that she was in her final year in senior high school or that all her friends did. Naomi and Terence both agreed she was better off without a boy. But while Naomi's concern was born from love, from a mother's instinct to protect her child, Terence's reasons were something far more sinister. At first, Naomi didn't think much of it. She even appreciated the way Terence took such an active role in Mia's life. He was strict, yes, but wasn't that what a good father did? When Mia would come home talking about a boy from school, Terence would go rigid. He would scold her and even ground her. If a boy so much as looked at Mia for too long, he would lose his temper. "You don't need boys sniffing around you," he would snap. Whenever Mia tried to argue, he would go berserk on her. His voice filled with anger. Naomi didn't quite understand. But she believed it was just an overprotective father. A man that cared for the well-being of his innocent girl a little too much. "It's for your own good," he would say. The same words Naomi always used. And so, she didn't question it. She thought Terence was just being an exemplary father, a man who knew exactly how teenage boys thought because he had once been one himself. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments that made her slightly uneasy. Like the way Terence's anger felt personal, like it wasn't just about keeping Mia safe but about keeping her away from other boys. He acted betrayed by her actions. He was hurt. There were moments he would stare at her for too long, his eyes dark with something Naomi couldn't quite name. He always wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, what she was wearing. But Naomi ignored those feelings. She ignored them because she trusted him. Because she loved him. Because the thought that her husband, her perfect husband, could see Mia as anything other than his daughter was too horrific to even consider. But little did she know that no matter how much she wished, it wouldn't change the monster that she had married. Naomi's world was turned upside down the day she walked into her living room to find her daughter, Mia, sitting on the couch, wearing a t-shirt with no underwear. The look on Mia's face was one of devastation, and Naomi's instincts told her that something was terribly wrong. She sat beside her, holding her hands as she cried and asked if everything was okay. But Mia told her nothing. She said it was just school stress and fear about going off to college soon. But Mia was just 17 and she had a long way before college. She didn't have to leave town. She didn't have to leave home unless she was willing to. But despite how well Mia lied, Naomi was a mother and she could see that her little girl wasn't okay. Days after, Naomi tried to reassure herself that everything was okay, that Mia was just going through a tough time. But deep down, she knew that something was off. As the days went by, Naomi noticed that Mia was acting strangely. She was withdrawn and quiet. Naomi tried to talk to her, to get her to open up, but Mia refused. What would you do if your child was struggling, but wouldn't talk to you? Would you push them to open up, or would you give them space? Naomi was torn between her desire to protect her daughter and her need to respect Mia's boundaries. As the weeks went by, Naomi's concerns only grew. She began to suspect that something was terribly wrong, that Mia was in some kind of danger. But she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Then one day, Mia asked Naomi if they were broke. Naomi was taken aback by the question, but she reassured Mia that they were not broke. Terence was taking care of everything. He paid the rent, utilities, and they had enough money to get by. It was a strange question. But Naomi would get to understand why in the next few days. It was a night like every other. Naomi woke up to find that the bed beside her was empty. She'd had a rough day at work but she forced herself out of bed. Call it a mother's intuition, but she wanted to check up on Mia. Naomi didn't give much thought to Terence's absence. He made working at night a habit for the past few months. She guessed he might be in the kitchen or living room. But as she approached the hallway, she saw him coming out of the bathroom. When she asked him where he had gone, he said he had gone to the kitchen to get some water. His hands were wet and he was slightly out of breath. At once, Naomi knew that something was off. She could see the bulge in his trousers, and she knew that he was lying. "Let's get back to bed," he asked. But Naomi said she had to get water and make an urgent phone call. That's how he left. Naomi decided to go to Mia's room. She wanted to check on her daughter, to make sure that she was okay. But as she approached the door, she caught a whiff of something that made her blood run cold. It was Terrence's cologne. It was in Mia's room. In that moment, Naomi realized that her worst fears were true. Terrence was taking advantage of her daughter. He was betraying her trust, and he was hurting the person she loved most in the world. What would you do if the man you promised to love forever was taking advantage of the daughter you've been trying to protect her whole life? Would you confront him, or would you try to protect your daughter at all costs? Naomi's world was turned upside down, and she didn't know what to do. The first signs were easy to ignore. Naomi wasn't the type of woman who let paranoia cloud her judgment, and besides, she trusted her husband. But sometimes, things didn't feel right. The way Terrence looked at Mia, too soft, too lingering. Naomi would brush it off, telling herself she was imagining things. It started with small things. Mia would lock her bedroom door when she never used to. She started dressing differently, more mature, covering up more. Naomi chalked it up to teenage rebellion. Then there were the nights Naomi would wake up to find Terrence missing from their bed. She'd hear movement down the hall, but when she checked, everything seemed normal. Mia would be in her room. Terrence would be in the kitchen, claiming he just needed water. The realization hit Naomi like a freight train. The man she loved, the man she had built her life around, had broken everything they had built. The man who had promised to love and care for Mia had instead broken her spirit. How could you forgive such betrayal? And how could you protect your daughter, knowing that the one person she should have been able to trust was the one causing her pain? Have you ever felt like there was no other option, like the weight of everything on your shoulders was too much to bear? Imagine being in a situation where the person you trusted most, the one you built your life with, betrayed you and hurt your child. How far would you go to protect the ones you love? That night, Naomi's mind was consumed with a storm of emotions. She had tried everything to keep her family together, to believe that the man she loved could never hurt her daughter. Mia was crying. She was curled under her sheets and shaking. "Please, Mom. Make him stop." 5 words. 5 words that changed Naomi's life. 5 words that made her do the unthinkable. 5 words that made her commit murder. A cop. A woman sworn to protect others. Couldn't protect her own daughter. The irony of it all. The heartbreak. The pain. Naomi's hands trembled as she walked to her bedroom drawer, pulling out an item she had never thought she would need against her own husband. Naomi walked to Terrence's study. He sat at his computer, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break. How could he be so calm, so detached, when everything was falling apart? Naomi's voice broke as she asked the question that would reveal his treachery. Terrence, still oblivious to the danger that loomed over him, responded carelessly, saying he hadn't. He claimed he had been too busy, focusing on his work. But Naomi was no longer willing to accept his lies. She had listened to Mia's broken words, the pain in her daughter's voice as she relayed the truth. No longer able to contain her anger and hurt, Naomi confronted him. She told him what Mia had said, how Terrence had been in her room earlier that night. At first, Terrence was defensive, dismissing the accusations. He said he was just making sure Mia was okay, that she was doing her homework, that it was no big deal. Naomi's heart shattered as she listened to his words. Mia wasn't just her daughter. She was a girl, scared, violated, and silenced by the man Naomi had trusted most. Naomi told him, through gritted teeth, that Mia had told her everything, that she was no longer willing to live with this lie. His response was a slap to Naomi's face. He looked at her in disgust, and said he wasn't willing to take care of another man's daughter. He wasn't going to do it anymore. Terence confessed that he was making Mia pay for the rent and having to live under his roof. Then he said Mia would have to be okay with it or move out of his place. At that moment, Naomi realized that she was with a mad man. A man without remorse or conscience. And that's when she pulled the trigger. Mia was scared by the gunshot and she fled their home. A few minutes later, the police arrived to see Naomi sitting on the floor, covered in her own husband's blood. She didn't give him time to defend himself. She didn't give him time to be judged by the court. No, she didn't give him time. She passed the final judgment and with that, condemned her own life. Forensic analysts found traces of the late Terence in Mia. He had really forced himself on her that night. But no matter how much the court sympathized with Naomi, a broken mother who was trying to save her daughter. A mother who felt guilty for being blind enough to not see the signs. A woman hurt and betrayed beyond redemption. They couldn't save her. She had to pay for her revenge. And so, she was sentenced to die by lethal injection. It didn't matter that she was an officer of the law. Naomi Carter had broken the law. She'd taken law into her own hands and she wouldn't be there to watch her daughter grow up. So when next you see a love that seems too perfect to be true, a love that makes you think fairy tales do exist, ask yourself. What truly lies behind that mask? What can love blind us to? And how much can we forgive when the chips are down?